Alright, we're going to put the landing gear on, or put the bolts in for the landing gear. Basically you want to get a landing gear that's going to be, with this particular plane, if you use a 74 stroke 14-inch prop, you're going to have about a quarter to a half-inch ground clearance, which is fine. That's what I've been using. But my ground clearance from the outside edge here straight down to the tabletop is about 5 1/4 with the wheels on it. It's about 4 1/2 with the wheels off of it. So, alright, what we're going to do now is we are going to put in the landing gear. Not install it, but we're going to install the screws for it. And I think that's pretty much the last step we want to do to the fuselage, and then we'll be ready to wrap it up. So I'm going to flip it over upside down here. And I went ahead and made a center mark. I just went by the whole width of the fuselage from the outer edge, grabbed the center there, marked it, grabbed the center here, marked it, and I just took my straight edge, made a nice light straight line going right across. And then I did the same thing on my landing gear. I just basically took the center of the two holes, because it's a little tougher to get the center of this. If you can find the center any way you want to, this piece here I went through, marked the center, and I just made a little mark on the outside here, because you're going to be laying it upside down, so you want your center line to be going across here, not across the top, because of course you won't be able to see it. So I put a center mark there, and I put a center mark here on both sides of it. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my center lines and line them up with your landing gear. Now if you notice on the landing gear there's a, how we're going to see this on the film, there's a curved angle. The curved angle goes towards the back of the plane. The straight angle stays at the front of the plane. So now I'm just going to take my two marks and line them up. And that's about where I want my landing gear to be. And now you can either go ahead and mark it with a pen, but I'm just going to go ahead with my drill and drill it right out. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use blind nuts in mine. So I want to make sure that my blind nuts are going to work. So I'm going to take just a scrap piece of wood. I'm going to drill out a hole and test fit the blind nut. And that seems to be the hole for the piece I need. And then we're going to draw this in by using the screws for the blind nut after we do it, and then of course we are going to epoxy it in. So I went ahead and got that. You could start with a smaller drill bit. Actually, it's probably the best thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and change my drill bit. Get my centers, and I'm just going to drill right through the landing gear. And that way I'll know my first bolt hole is exactly where it's going to be. The best way to do it is to do one, and then go ahead and put your bolt right in it. And before you drill out your second one, and that way you're sure to be exactly where you want to be when you go to drill it. I can't see my lines because I'm half blind. But that looks like where I want it to be. I'll bring it down forward. Now I'm just going to make one drill in the center, as close to the center as I can, and try to go where the piece is. And I finish drilling out that hole. You want to be careful. There's nothing in there that's my drill bit's going to hit. I should have looked first to make sure I wasn't going to hit my servo rail, so I didn't dig it all the way through. But now I'm just going to go ahead and take my bolt and stick it right through. I don't need to put the blind nut in yet. I'm just getting the holes for it. And make sure that my marks came out. They're still on center, so I'm looking good. Now I'm just going to make sure that this is as straight as I want it. Good way, just by eye on the back of the fuselage. You can go through and measure if you want to be absolutely positive. Now I'm just going to take the actual bolt, or the drill bit I need. It's going to be too big for that. So I need to change my bit over again. And this is much easier, of course, without the wheels on the landing gear unit, but I have already put my landing gear wheels on because this is actually coming from a different plane. Alright, so I'm lined up. And I'm just going to get as close to center as possible here. And once again, just drill a pilot, switch the bit. I'm going to drill out my second hole. It's always better to start small. Suppose I could have made that straight in there, but job's done nonetheless. And now, a pair of needle nose pliers or something to help drop those blind nuts in. And this is probably the best way to do it. Of course, we could have went through and put these in before we even glued all the hatch stuff around it. You could have pre-mounted them to the, what is it I'm trying to say? You could have pre-mounted them on the landing gear block before we even glued the landing gear block in. But I forgot. And I knew we were going to have a pop hatch, so I knew I'd have access to it. So there, I got a blind nut there. Basically now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put both blind nuts on. And then take a washer and put the washer around the screw. And then I'm just going to draw in with the screw until the blind nut's seated right where I want to seat it. And then I'm going to drop some epoxy in there. Alright, as you can see, I got my blind nuts in here. So I just dropped my 2 blind nuts down in there, right where the screws are going to be. And after I get them kind of pressed into the hole, I just take the screw, put a washer on the back of the screw. That makes it a little easier. And then I'm just going to tighten them right in. I'm going to draw them right into the wood. And as soon as I feel that they're drawn in, usually when the screw stops, I know they're in good place. So I'm going to flip it over. I already did the other one because I'm showing you for demonstration purposes. I'm just going to grab some epoxy here. Mix some good epoxy up, make sure we're in the film. And I just took a piece of scrap wood actually because I need a nice long reach. Now if you want to, you don't even have to do the blind nut thing. You can just use wood screws on the other end. Or screw the bolt and nut on it, so you don't have to do any of this blind nut stuff if you don't want to. I had the blind nuts and the pieces that went here to the original plane, so I'm just going to go ahead and epoxy them right in and I'll be set. And make sure you don't get any epoxy inside the holes for the screws. That would spell trouble. So I got my bolts for my landing gear put in there. I'm just going to let that sit and dry. And this is the product I was talking about right here. Aero Gloss, just a dope thinner type stuff. That's all I ever use. Don't know which way the camera's angled. I think that way. But just a hot fuel proof stuff. Basically just take a paintbrush and just going to completely paint the hole inside of here with it. And I'm going to paint the hole inside in here with it. It goes on real thin. It's almost like paint thinner. But it just soaks into the wood and seals it, so if the gas leaks in there, you're good to go. But that is pretty much it on the fuselage. Any more little tips before I say we're wrapped up with it? Probably not. Well, we are wrapped up with it. But another little trick to sanding this baby. Now, if you want to, take a nice piece of fine sandpaper if you want to take the corners down. And you just basically put them over the edges and rub it this way and just go right down the line. You can sweep it back and forth, however you want to do it. I'm going to kind of leave mine in just a little square, I think, just because it's real thin up here on top, and I don't want to make it any thinner to where it meets the firewall, but I might just take the corners off, just the edge off, and that's about it. But other than that, it's going to be pretty much ready for monocoating. We'll do a whole final sand on the thing before we go ahead and monocoat it, because the better you sand, the nicer your finish is going to look, of course, with anything like that. But the wheels are in, the fuselage is completely built. We have our servo pieces in, we have our control line in. I have my blind nuts for the landing gear in. Got our servos in the back end. And the stabilizer platform to glue everything down to, so we can pretty much put this aside and we're going to build the wing. And then we'll wrap all the pieces individually because it's easier that way. And then we'll glue everything onto the plane and it'll be done. So the next process is the wing is probably the easiest thing to build of everything. So pretty much good to go here.